When I was a child, one of the first cards I owned was a copy of Karate Man. I thought he was kind of garbage because it destroyed itself in the end phase if you use the effect, so it doesn't really act as good tempo. But the thing is, in hindsight, looking back at it now, outing Dark Elf was such a massive threat in the 10-year-old Playgrounds meta. So as spot removal, it is actually kind of good. And on top of that, if it did manage to survive for another turn, you were able to get a decent amount of chip damage in if you protected it with something maybe like a Battle Trap. Because in the end, he is like a measly 1000 beater, but all of those reasons together made him maybe a decent one-of. Now, my analysis of a Yu-Gi-Oh card that's older than probably most of the people watching this video aside, did you notice that nothing I said about Karate Man was related to the fact that this is a black guy in Japan? As a kid, I remember very vividly thinking this card was super cool because it meant that even non-Asians could do Kung Fu.
Yes, I'm aware Karate Man is a cultural reference to Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon. And of course the Jeet Kune Do fighting style, which is obviously not derived from the Japanese karate.
This card, I suppose, technically is kind of a historical mess, if we're looking purely at accuracy here. But here's the thing about Karate Man when looking back at it when I was 10 years old. Who gives a shit? The thing is, a lot of people. If you aren't aware of what's going on here, when you look at the new Ubisoft trailer for Assassin's Creed Shadows, you would think that people here would be going out of their mind over something related to gameplay, or perhaps it's Ubisoft as a company. Are they dislike bombing this video because Ubisoft has been releasing buggy, crappy, copy-pasted, poorly made garbage for the better part of 20 years? No. Is it because of the $100 price tag of a video game to get a 3-day early access? Nope. Still not why they're mad. The overwhelming negative response to this has been because the main character is African. Now, this isn't my usual kind of content, but I'm feeling kind of creative on this weekend and I wanted to try something a little bit different anyway. So I hope you enjoy. Let's dissect this topic in 4 different portions. Let's begin with entry number 1, talking about historical accuracy in video games. On to point number 2. Is Yasuke, the protagonist of Assassin's Creed Shadows, a real, but further than that, a worthy protagonist of a AAA title video game? And number 3, if yes or not, does it even matter? And then portion number 4 will be closing out with some personal thoughts and conclusions. Video games and how accurate they are is a pretty subjective thing. There are games which try to mimic mechanical realism and have you doing everything and anything that is as close to warfare as possible in Arma 3, for example. There are stories in old Call of Duty video games with World War II, mimicking some real, actual battles that took place between the Soviets and the Nazis, from Minsk all the way to Berlin in the mid-1940s. Assassin's Creed, on the other hand, is what you call historical fiction, which in some ways sounds like kind of a ridiculous, paradoxical term. Historical, but also fictional. What this actually means by definition is taking a realistic environment and setting and creating a story and universe within that time period, usually adhering and fitting to its own set of rules. It's literally fanfiction for grown-up adult men, but don't say this because it really triggers them. An example of creating rules within a universe, let's look at something like, I don't know, anime and Dragon Ball Z. A super special alien race that gets more powerful and has the ability to control energy based on their emotions. One could argue that, well, this is just a cartoon in theory, right? You could basically write anything you want into something like this. Well, within reason. Imagine if during the Frieza saga, Chi-Chi shows up, goes Super Saiyan Blue, and then Gallic guns his ass all the way over to Snake Way. In the prequels of Star Wars, they tried to make power levels of Jedi somehow tied to a real medical and numerical measurement called the midichlorians. Both of these examples could theoretically work. Technically, you could actually have this be a thing, but they would suck, and it would be probably just be considered bad writing. And you would probably be scorned forever for breaking rules within your own created narrative and universe. Therefore, the idea of a black African becoming a master samurai assassin should be pretty ridiculous within the confines of this historical period, right? Well, actually, this brings us over to chapter 2 here. This is why people are mad. This loyalty and dedication to accuracy, historical authenticity. This is what has people so angry, justifiably so, right? No, actually, not even close. Nothing about this protagonist or story is unrealistic or fabricated. In fact, the irony is that out of all of the Assassin's Creed's protagonists, in like the 37 fucking games or however many they've made at this point, Yasuke is actually probably plausibly the most accurate protagonist they've ever had in an Assassin's Creed game. To cut a very long story short, Yasuke, original name unknown, came to Japan likely as a slave or hired mercenary through a Jesuit missionary and became the retainer, squire, whatever term you want to use, of Oda Nobunaga, one of the most powerful samurai of all time. So there is absolutely historical precedent for the existence of such a character and role to exist in Assassin's Creed. So what's the problem?
He wasn't a real samurai, he was just a bodyguard.
Yasuke was absolutely a real samurai, and would very much be considered as such. Those calling him just a bodyguard, just a bodyguard, to one of the most powerful and prestigious samurais in all of Japanese history, second to maybe only Miyamoto Musashi himself, are clearly missing just how fucking important someone like that would actually be. There's a lot of discourse and debate specifically on the title of samurai and what that actually consists of, what it is or isn't, and just a lot of goalpost moving. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to learn more about the specific point on the validity of Yasuke's samuraiship to a Reddit post translated from Kaneko Hiraku writing in the Shinchokoki of the most prestigious historical institute in all of Japan, which TLDR concludes, long story short, that actually yes, Yasuke was definitely a samurai. Okay, fine, he was kind of important. But why couldn't they just go with a native Japanese person? Because my immersion. And this right here is where these arguments start to err into, the kind of people.
Fucking pronouns!
Of all the things that are important to me as a gamer, gameplay, for example, or the $100 price tag for the 3-day early access, I can promise you the ethnicity of a video game character is like priority number 17 to me at that point. Immersion? Really? Immersion in an Assassin's Creed game?
Do you know what lies within? Or do you mean to tell me the great and powerful assassins didn't figure it out?
Figure what out?
God. It's God that dwells within.
By the way, I'm not trying to bash this ending or anything. The Assassin's Creed 2 games with Ezio are fucking incredible, and I loved them at the time. But fist fighting the Pope after disarming his Christ saber? That's fine. But we draw the line at African? Yasuke is a badass who has had all kinds of entertaining media created about him, and is absolutely worthy of being a video game protagonist, both historically as well as his cultural impact. Which answers most of portion 3 of this discussion, I suppose, at this point. If the ethnicity of the protagonist samurai in a video game matters so much to you that you're willing to forego literal historical evidence, then I'd really like you to kind of introspectively ask yourself why that's so important to you. Why do you care so much about this but not any of the other shocking details that have come out about Assassin's Creed Shadows? Why is the gameplay not the most important aspect for you? Are you okay with Assassin's Creed reprinting and making the same exact game over and over again for multiple years? Or the absurd pricing structure of this? Listen, if the ethnicity of the protagonist Japanese samurai matters so much to you, I would highly recommend Ghost of Tsushima if that's your... That's what you really need from a game, is for the samurai to be Japanese ethnically. Well, closing thoughts. I actually have that many personal thoughts on it other than this is kind of ridiculous. But like I said, I wanted to do something a little bit different. It's just funny to me because it reminded me so much about how I had a Karate Man in my collection and how I used to just look at the artwork and think about all of those crazy kung fu movies back at the time. And just how that it was a black character with an afro as a Karate Man just didn't matter to me. I honestly think if this card was printed today, it would cause such an uproar. From both sides of the spectrum, by the way. In the end, what really mattered to me was, could I out that annoying Dark Elf? And was Karate Man going to help me get there? Would this be one of the most biggest and powerful normal summons in the game? Yasuke being black or not won't make Assassin's Creed Shadows a good or bad game. It will likely be a bad game we'll forget about within a week of its release, just like every other Assassin's Creed game, because they haven't made a good one since Black Flag. And not only because Ubisoft probably just did this deliberately in order to get free marketing to further drive their revenues and profits, and also not because woke and forced diversity. None of this matters. Irrespective of Yasuke being black or not, the game is going to be good or bad regardless of this fact. And that's really ultimately what matters in the end, is if it plays well. The craziest part in all of this to remember is do not let this distract you from the fact that Karate Man is bald. On the trap card Weed Out, Karate Man is exposed to be wearing a wig as he flies through the dimension portal. And that right there may just be the most damning fact in all of this debate. He's bald! Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this variety style of content. Drop a like, and let me know if you'd like to see more. Subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, adios!